Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and the Ospreys are here to greet us tonight. And Garland Nixon's here once again. It's lovely to have you, Garland. How you doing tonight?
Wonderful, wonderful. Great to be back.
Okay, and man, you're looking good. You look like you've been out enjoying the weather or something.
Oh man, all the time. I'm loving it. Loving this however long we've got this mid-July weather, I'll take it. Having a blast. I just wish we could get a little less wind so I could do some boating, but oh well, you got to play the hand you're dealt, right?
Yeah, yeah. Where do you boat out of?
All over. Um it depends on what I'm doing, but I do a lot of out of Solomon's. Chop
Okay.
Tank River, I like Chop Tank and Solomon's. Those are two of my favorite. Solomon's is one of my favorite places. Mid to late on late into the year.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to get you over to over here to Cobb Island, down to Charles County Peninsula. You go down to St. Mary's County all the time, or St. Mary's, as they say
Yeah.
down there. Have you got that Southern Maryland accent down yet?
No, I don't have that tobacco accent yet.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. I was telling, I was listening today to George Webb. He snagged an interview with David Icke, believe it or not, and
Mhm.
it's great to see these connections developing. And I know you know George from him being with you and Lee Stranahan when
Yeah.
you had your show together. So. And he's been doing some pretty amazing reporting. I recommend everyone to check George Webb out at it's called Blackberry Roadshow now. Isn't that right, Andy Dabala? Andy produces that show as well. So that's right. That's what it is, Blackberry Roadshow. Anyway, they were talking about what what's wrong and what we need to do, and I think David Icke's point, if I can try to just grab one of them, was that we need a new paradigm. We need a new understanding of what it means to be human, what it's like here to be, what a new understanding of who we are and what is really going on. And I guess to bring that into my own thinking is that we have got so many layers of deceit that have been laid on us since World War II that to me that is the cause. That is my cause, is basically is to do what it says, do the know the truth, and then the truth will set us free. I believe that. I believe in the truth, and I think there's a great effort to try to obscure the truth, but we know we know that there is such a thing as truth, and without that, there's just nothing to guide us when it comes down to it. But my my question that I wanted to start with tonight, just to do something a little bit different, would be to say, well, okay, we talk about sovereignty and how important it is just to recognize that this is a sovereign country. Well, my question is, what is American culture today? What is it if you were to say, well, here's the parts of American culture that I think are essential. You couldn't be American without, say, hot dogs, apple pie, something like that. But that's a little trite right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
What do we call what is it that is American culture? And I guess we could start with sports, or we could start with a certain different kinds of music, or rock and roll, or dancing. But I'm interested in your opinion, just kind of off the top of your head. What are the essential elements of American culture if you had to describe it to somebody?
Well, I think there's a couple of things you would have to acknowledge in a country this size, that there's more than one culture. You know what I mean? You would have to acknowledge the reality that if I go to West Hollywood, if I go to the Valley, right? There is a culture. If I go to a small town in Mississippi, there's a different culture. You know what I mean? If I go to Harlem in New York, these are very, very different cultures. And I think the first thing to understand is there are commonalities. If you look at Europe, one of the things you notice a lot too is a lot of countries that are smaller, right? Ours, if you look at us and like the US and put it over top of Europe, you'll find just about the same, that there are various cultures. You know, you have like, I know areas in up in Pennsylvania where like a lot of German people moved to, you know what I mean? And that whole area of Pennsylvania is very, very German. I think part of America that we don't really acknowledge is this kind of mosaic thing. It used to be that way. It's funny, and most of the cities used to be like that. When I was in when I was a kid, like Baltimore, there were areas. Greek town, literally, they would call it that area. There was literally an area that was known as Jew town, as Greek town, as, you know what I mean? And so these, I think the first thing about American culture is to recognize that there is more than one culture here already. We can pretend there isn't. There's commonalities, and you know, and I think one of the commonalities in American culture, I think, is a respect for hard work. And I think one of the things that's going on now is the traditional culture in America is crashing into this neoliberalist, globalist culture. You know what I mean? And there's some basic cultures which I'm not going to say that people are comfortable with. You know what I mean? That people are comfortable with the way they live, and that are basic things that make people's lives what they are and their communities what they are, and they're not negative and hurting anyone. And the neoliberalism wants to come in and say you can't be like this or you can't think like that. I think that's a problem, and they're attacking this culture and that culture. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that you use the fact that neoliberalism is really attacking various cultures, and that whole globalist thing wants to turn us into one blob. The French people want to be French, and they want a French culture. There's nothing the hell wrong with French people. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing wrong with that. You know, so I think the discussion of culture, as long as it's not a, you know, when you get to the point where my culture has to be better than your culture, therefore I have to dominate you and I can take your resources away, that's when I have a problem with it. But when it's respect for everybody else's culture, this whole neoliberalism thing is a problem for a lot of people, because there are people that enjoy having a culture of their group, their own, their community, whatever they came from, whatever. I'm Irish or Greek or German. It's okay. You know what I mean? To still have those cultures and to practice them. I don't know if I even answered the question right.
Oh, that was not a test.
Yeah, but I mean, I just threw some kind of rambled for a while. I think after a while, I just stopped rambling. I never really got anywhere.
Well, there's an awful lot of truth in what you say, and I agree with you that it's a good thing to have your traditional cultures. And I don't know, what about sexuality? I mean, you know, vive la différence. You know, I like traditional sexuality. I think it's pretty cool. But is I don't know, the increasing variety, I guess, of sexuality that is part of our culture expands our culture, and I don't know, I can't say that's a bad thing. I think everybody needs to be free, and I don't really care, you know, what people want to do. That may be the idea, that we are an expanding freedom culture, that we not only do those of us that feel that we have freedom, do we cherish that freedom, but we want everyone to have it. And right. Those of us that don't are simply insecure, immature, and you know, the type that want to be the class president and then, you know, run everything so that they can make sure that they don't lose some advantage they perceive, or you know, lose the popularity contest. Insecure people, I think, have gravitated somehow into power positions in our country, to the extent that they're just afraid to let us be free. Does that make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense as to where we are now, because I feel like you know, I just wake up every morning and I'm like, man, I'm worried, because the people that are running, you use the word insecure. That's one way to put it. I mean, I usually just say the people that are running our country are lunatics, absolute lunatics. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I guess in being absolute lunatics, they're insecure. I had someone recently ask me, you know, what grade would you give Joe Biden after 100 days? I said, look, I said, for starters, you know, when I was in law enforcement and in training, that's a brief story to make sense of this, we would have Like I'd put together maybe tests, and there would be one question that if you answer that one wrong, you failed. You know what I mean? It's like, that's something you never do. I would, if a person said hi, I would A, do this, B, C, kick them in the groin. Oh, you flunked. If that's an automatic flunk, if you circle that one. Okay. So what I said was this: when I look at his Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, that's an F. I don't care what else you do. If you hire that sociopath, the guy is nothing but, let's face it, he is a one of Benjamin Netanyahu's assistant. He is absolutely one of the Israel or firster guys. Doesn't seem to have his true allegiance to the U.S. in my opinion. And what allegiance that he has is just pure neocon warmonger. To me, he is just a fascist. And if you choose him, I don't care what else you do, I ain't giving you a good grade. He's a very sick man, and he's a dangerous man. And I mean, for somebody right now knowing that nuclear weapons are something that could end mankind, and to like, hey, what's your plan? I know I'm going to go pick a fight with these two nuclear nations. The only ones that could really take us out and destroy us. Yeah, those are the ones that I'm going to pick a fight with. If you pick that sociopath to me, you get an F. Biden gets an F for that guy, because it tells me if you pick a sociopath, you got to be a sociopath. And to be honest, they all are sociopaths to me when I look at because let me respond to something that you said earlier when you mentioned the idea of sovereignty, right? When I'm big on that, I believe in that, right? And that's why I'm so opposed to neoliberalism and globalism, because that's what they hate the most. And the intelligence community is sovereignty. But one thing I got to say, to me, the one thing I hate is the hypocrite who says, I believe in sovereignty, but that nation over there, we got a right to go name a new president for them, overthrow them, do something to them, sanction them. You know what I mean? To me, if you truly believe in sovereignty, that's to say, I believe in sovereignty for whatever country. And Saudi Arabia is an example to me. Saudi Arabia is a very repressive regime. There's no question in your mind. Okay. If somebody said, are you the president of the United States, Garland, will you do business with Saudi Arabia? I'd say, sure, I'll do business with them. It's not my job to determine whether they're right or wrong or good or bad. That's a different country. Will I do business with them? Yes. I wouldn't sanction them. I'd do business with them. To be quite honest, if it was me, I would do kind of like the Russias and Chinas of the world do. Anybody to do business with me, I'll do business with you. You know what I'm saying? And to me, that's the way. I mean, these people claim to believe in a market. They don't really, you know what I mean? They claim, oh, we're free marketers. That's not true. All they're ever doing is trying to manipulate the market on behalf. The whole thing of China, a big part of that is, oh, China's stealing so much of the market. Well, if you believe in the market, then I guess the market will handle it. Nope. I got to go in and handle it. They don't really have anything that they truly believe in, except constantly trying to work to their advantage. But that's my thing about sovereignty. To believe in sovereignty, to me, is to believe in sovereignty for everybody, even people that you consider your adversaries. Even if you don't agree with their style of government, it's none of your business. Say, I don't have to agree. Here, I'm selling you this wheat. You give me this money. Go live your life. If your people overthrow you, that's between you and your people. If they don't, that's between them. Or if the UN Security Council calls us and asks us for a vote, I'll vote yay or nay or whatever it is. But don't ask me to spend the resources of my country running around the world trying to overthrow every government in the world with some, hopped up reason.
Well, that's what they've been doing ever since World War II. That's what the U.S. State Department and the CIA have been doing, and they've been doing it without any. The voters didn't say, we would like you to take over Guatemala now, sir. Would you please go and overthrow Mossadegh in Iran? We don't like him anymore. Did American voters ever have a say in any of this nonsense? Did we decide, Sukarno should really have an entirely new government, and let's just get rid of all, all the people that ever went to a communist rally in Indonesia? Let's just wipe them out. Did we ever decide, that we wanted to go to Vietnam and to destroy that culture? And no. This has been an out of control program that we can't just wave a wand and stop. This is a huge train that we've got to figure out some way to get a hold of the engine and slow it down and throw on the brakes and say, stop this thing, stop it. It's going too fast. It's going too hard. It's a hellbound train, in the words of an old blues song. it's a hellbound train, Garland, and we can't just sit here and say, oh, that's not what it should be. It shouldn't be that, because it is that. I mean, the blob exists. The blob is pushing American troops, into foreign countries to do terrible things just for the purpose of the blob. It has nothing to do with what the American people asked for. And the obfuscation of this truth is horrific. So, I mean, I don't know what the answer is, except for, yeah, you're right. Let's just keep on recognizing it. Let's call out Blinken, and let's. I do hear a great resonance between you and Harley Schlanger's comments this morning on his show, where he said, Blinken and Biden have been together since George Bush's Iraq War. They were supporting George W. Bush's Iraq War, and we know that was built on a lie, that there was no weapons of mass destruction, and we know that was a Cheney operation for the same people, the PNAC, the Project for a New American Century, the creeps behind the Carlyle Group. All of this stuff is the same robbers that are going out and taking country after country for their own benefit. Blinken supported the Libya operation, the attacks on the Syrian rebels, again, the Saudis. But once again, they claim that they are for a rules-based order. They say it's a rules-based order, and if you don't follow their rules, then you're violating our values. So you got to go. That is where the human rights question really comes from. Is that, are we actually going to take away the human rights of human beings in foreign countries on the idea that we are doing it to secure human rights?
Yeah, and clearly, I mean, it's clearly, okay, so the U.S. it's laughable for the United States to make any human rights arguments. I mean, we're human rights. At the same time, we're supporting a Saudi war that's like starving and killing the poorest country, which is Yemen in the Middle East. At the same time, we're supporting the Israelis and their terrible oppression of the Palestinian people. There's any numbers for the U.S. to argue. At the same time, we're starving the Syrians. We're starving the Venezuelans. We're literally making it so people can't get medicine. I've heard numbers in Venezuela of like 10,000 a year that die. So we're going around blabbering all over the place about human rights, while the U.S. is the worst violator of human rights. And here's the bad thing about it, what you just said. So we want to tell everybody, well, we've got a rules-based order. But here's one thing you will never hear anybody tell you: what the rules are. Isn't that interesting? We got a rules-based order. Really, Tony Blinken? Where are the rules? Are they written down? Can you point them out somewhere? Are there any rules? That's the fact that because actually, I'll be honest, if like one of these other heads of state, if they were like at a big meeting, they said, you must abide by the rules-based order, and another one of the heads of state said, well, what are the rules? They couldn't tell them. Because there are none. Because the term rules-based order is an offensive weapon. It is a phrase that is used as a weapon to say, they go on this, it's almost a religious moral crusade to go around the world and tell everybody you have to go have a government like ours. When you have to have a liberal democracy. The truth is, we don't even have a liberal democracy. I don't feel like we have any democracy at all myself anymore. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my feeling. So do we like go around the world telling everybody how they have to live? Oh, by the way, and if you don't, we'll bomb you and we'll kill you. But there's got to be a rules-based order. But here's the bottom line. Don't we have a UN? Isn't there already international agreements, international accords that we're signed on to, the UN Charter that we're signed on? So the bottom line is there are rules. There are rules like Israel should. One of the rules is Israel has to give back the Golan Heights to Syria. One of the rules is that the Israel building settlements in the occupied lands is illegal. These are UN rules. So we say there's a rules-based order, and the actual rules themselves, we ignore them. And if anyone says, where's the rules? Then there's nothing to be said. Why? Because the rule is the U.S. gets to run the world and gets to take everybody's stuff, whatever we want. In the 50s and 60s, the US was like telling smaller countries like in Central America and Africa, you have to listen to us. Oh, by the way, the first rule is you're not allowed to grow your own food. You have to purchase it from us. Can you imagine that? That is the ultimate control. See, now that's what those sanctions, if you set countries up where they're not allowed to buy their own food, first of all, you have to be an evil person to do that, but that's who these people are. They're not allowed to buy their own food and they have to buy it from you. That shuts down all their farm, a lot of their farming, things like that. But now you have control. Anytime they, it's like a dog. You don't do what I tell you, boom, I'm going to hide in your pan. And they did this to entire countries, for many, many years, probably still doing it today, So yeah, we're in to me, we're at a point now where I don't know how much it matters, how much the president is. I'll add this. Look at Biden. I mean, Biden, I think nothing of him. He's horrible. But so he wants to do one thing. He wants to bring the troops home, allegedly bring some of the troops home. We know a lot of that's a joke. But even that, even just the insinuating that he wanted to bring some troops, signaling and starting to do it, he's getting all this pushback. Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice were on TV the other day, both saying, oh, no, you can't do it. It's too soon. 20 years. 20 years is too soon. What are you going to be there? 1,000 for, an eternity? Which is what they want.
And there's another great example of, that's a Republican and a Democrat doing the same thing, Clinton and Condoleezza Rice play for the same policy and enriching the same already enriched people from Cheney and Bush and the whole Rockefeller connection for Clinton. All of it goes back to people that have already been, rich many times over and just, speculating. Is Russia a threat to the United States? And is China a threat to the United States, in your opinion?
Let's start here. The two things that I'll say. Now, keep in mind, you have two countries that have both continuously reached out to the United States and said, can we resolve all of our stuff diplomatically? Continually. Remember, Russia came to the US and said, hey, I got an idea. Let's come up with a cyber treaty. Let's get the top countries in the world. We'll come up with a cyber attack treaty. It's kind of just like the rules of war, and we'll all agree with it. Putin has repeatedly asked Biden that, and several other major countries have said we'll do it, and Biden will never even answer it. So they're a threat. So and these are companies. Let me add this. So we got ships, that we were going to put ships in the Black Sea, but we've got bases ringing around China. We got bases ringing around Russia. We're sailing in the South China Sea to show that it's open water or whatever the heck, right? Well, here's my question: do you see any Russian or Chinese ships in the Gulf of Mexico, off the East Coast, off the coast of Oregon, somewhere? Nowhere. So we go to other countries, we surround them with our ships, we literally overthrow the governments of countries on their border, and then we say, boy, this country's a threat to us. Remember, Saddam Hussein was a terrible threat to us. North Korea is the size of Pennsylvania. And you would be shocked how many Americans are like, yeah, that's a threat. North Korea, we've got what threat? It's halfway across the world. And it's the size of friggin' Pennsylvania. Of what threat is that to us? Absolutely none. We go over there, we fly along their border, and we do mock invasions on their border. And then we're like, man, those guys are paranoid. Gee, how did they get paranoid? You are literally doing mock invasions of their country on your border with the South Korean army, the military next to them. And then you say they're paranoid. I don't think that's paranoia. Just because you're paranoid don't mean somebody ain't out to get you. You're walking down the street and there's 4 shady guys walking behind you at night and you hear them going, hey, how do you think we ought to rob this guy? Should we beat him over the head? You're not paranoid. The evidence is clear. These people are menacing you. So that's, my opinion is, if you look at who initiates conflict, who initiates war, if you're honest about it, who in the world is out menacing other countries? We got a list of countries a mile long that we want to overthrow right now. Nicaragua, Cuba, Syria, Iran. Let's keep going. Russia, China. Our government has literally said they want regime change there. I could go to Ecuador, Bolivia, basically any country where there's not a quote friendly government. The US only sees two kinds of countries: countries that are under our control, and countries that we intend to overthrow and get under our control. So to me, no, Russia and China are not going out. Russia and China is going around the world trying to do business with people. Why are we mad at them over Germany, Nord Stream 2? They want to sell Germany gas. They do not want to invade Germany. They're like a little smarter than we are. They're like, hey, we can like get a pretty good contract with the Germans. That ain't about tanks. And we're literally saying, no, you can't do business with them. Allegedly, we're saying it's not safe for Germany to do this deal with Russia, to buy gas from Russia, even though they're already buying that gas from Russia. They're just going to reroute it through a different pipe. So they will be somehow unstable if they buy the same gas they're buying from Russia, but they route it through a different pipe that doesn't go through our ally, our colony of Ukraine, and they don't have to pay Ukraine like $7 billion a year anymore. Well, what do you know? So, I mean, yeah, no, I don't think Russia and China are adversaries of ours. I think they are countries that are doing their best to grow economically, and the U.S. doesn't want anybody that if there's a country that we want to steal their lithium, I think the U.S. wants to go overthrow the government. The U.S. doesn't want Russia and China to be able to come in and say, here's a counteroffer. Russia, we have a counteroffer to develop your lithium. China, we have a counteroffer. Then we got to make a legitimate offer. At that point, we got other superpowers and they're all saying, I'll do it for 100 billion. We got to say 101 billion, right? That ain't how we do. We just say, do it and give it to us or we'll kill you. We're mafia guys. And so we don't want somebody out there that can be legitimate, good faith business actors where if you just look at what we do, it ain't good faith. We overthrow you. And still, Venezuela, we should be saying, let's work with Venezuela and develop their oil if we want to say, hey, they got all this oil. No, that ain't what we're doing. We're like, we ain't working with them. We're going to overthrow the government, kill whoever we got to kill, bomb them or whatever, and then we'll take the oil. We don't want somebody that's going to come in there and sign off a deal and actually develop the oil for them.
All right. The United States is no longer a democracy. I agree with you. The rules-based order, which you described very well. I wrote down what Harley Schlanger said this morning. He said the rules-based order is a looting operation and a genocide machine. And
yes,
don't pull any punches, Harley, because that's what it is. And
that's criminal enterprise.
Basically what you said, it's a criminal enterprise. And, and that's like Doug Valentine's book, the CIA is as a criminal organization. And it is, because what's happened is I've been watching a lot of old stuff from the Executive Intelligence Review stuff. And there was a great video by Jeff Steinberg about the loss of the banking rules. And when they changed the banking rules in like the early 90s, and I'm not sure if that was Glass-Steagall or what, but there was a major change which ushered in the speculators, the money that should have been kept out of the banks.
I know what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. I can't remember it, but yes, yep.
So anyway, and then we had the savings and loan debacle right after that, if I recall. So this is early 90s stuff. But what happened then was a lot more important thing happened than just letting the speculators come into the investment banking. What happened was the money laundering came in to the banking system. And, you used to hear things said, and it's probably true, that if the drug money were out of the system would crash, because the system depends upon so much of a cash flow of churn, and that money's got to be there. And there's so much of it is involved in the drug money laundering system that you can't pull that out and not crash the system. So it's embedded now. It's like this cancer that's taking over and has been taking over for 30 years now. The money laundering is in, and so we've lost the floodgates are open. The dirty money has been in our banks, You know, it's in my 401k. It's in everybody's savings accounts. It's in the pensions. It's in everything. All of it has got dirty money in it. And with that, we also, of course, have got dirty money enforcement procedures, i.e., the mafia, you know, and not just the old Italian or Sicilian mafia, but all kinds of nasty mafias that, you know, we wouldn't even want to name, but Russian mafias, Jewish mafias, you know, that are ethnic or from all kinds of different. But the idea is that there is an attitude that, you know, hey, you got to pay up or I'm going to have to break your knees. And that attitude is it carries out now into our foreign policy. That, you know, a Joe Biden can say to the prosecutor in Ukraine, say, you know, hey, you want the $1 billion, you know, you got to not prosecute this guy. You got to cooperate. You got to go along with us. This influence of money laundering is not the beginning. It's not the end of the involvement of organized crime in our financial institutions. It's the beginning of it, because now they're controlling the boardrooms. Now they're controlling the deals that are made. And hey, if I've got a deal that requires, you know, the occupation of the Golan Heights by some military operation, and I can figure out a way to get somebody to go operate there and take it over so that I can claim all the offshore oil from that part of Syria, then you're not going to stop me, because, you know, I know the guys that break the knees, and you don't want that to happen, and you don't want it to happen to your family, and that is part of what's going on here, is the blackmail. The entire I think our entire Congress is under if not a direct threat, then one that they know if they get out of line that something bad can happen. I'm sorry, but I think we're all now victims of the opening of the banking system. And, you know, when did it start? I'm not exactly sure, but right now we've got dirty banks, dirty bankers, dirty banksters, and they are not asking the people of the United States what we want to do with our money. They're going to take our money. They're going to go out and use it in schemes to enrich themselves further. And that, in combination with NATO and the U.S. military and all the power that we have, is what's driving this system. It's not the American voters. We don't have a choice. This is no longer, as you just said, a democracy, Garland.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, it's fairly obvious that the system is spinning out of control. You know, a lot of people have different names for it. People on the left tend to call it neoliberalism. People on the right clean to call it globalism. It doesn't matter what you call it. But one of the things that we've seen this system does is everything is for profit. And so people think, oh, well, that's good. You can make a profit. Really? Should war be for profit? Should politics be? You know what I mean? And because that's what happens. There are some things war should be only for the defense of a nation. Somebody attacks you or attacks your ally, you know, protect them. War is not an offensive tool, and now it's a human rights tool. It's the sword of God. Why that country over there is doing something really bad? What are you going to do? We're going to use this good sword of God, which happened to be an F-16, and drop shrapnel on them and kill lots and lots of people, and then this situation will be set morally, right? That's what we're told. You know, it's funny. It's like there's the esoteric reality of it, where the people inside know we are attacking this country to take money, to run pipelines, to do stuff. And then there's I think it's called the exoteric, where basically the cover story. And it just amazes me that the American people can be such suckers, because like, the U.S. is supposedly taking some troops out of Afghanistan. I still have my doubts about that. But these people arguing, well, but what about the women there? Again, that's moral, right? We've got to stay there for moral reasons. If we don't stay there, we're not the good guys. We have to look out for the little people, as though somebody put a cape on our back and a red suit with an S on the chest that says you must go around the world and enforce the moral codes. But that's the PR spin. right, for the population to support a war that if they knew the truth, they wouldn't support. So the PR spin is, what about the poor little girls and the children? Oh, they've made such, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's the spin for us to go, yeah, well, I guess we can't leave because, hey, what about the girls and the children, right? And interior, the girls and the children are getting bombed just like everybody else, looted, raped, murdered, you name it. We are supporting this gigantic heroin trade, and who knows where the money's going off of that, but I'm sure a lot of mouths are shut by that money. How can we occupy a country that has that is the number one heroin producer in the world and pretend like we don't know what's going on right under our own noses? You know what I mean? Get out of here. But the reality is, that's where we are, and I'll end it by saying this, and that Afghanistan is a perfect example, and that is the U.S. wants the government, not the government, the people who run these puppets in our government have things they want to do. The things are not in our best interest. So what they have to constantly do is come up with creative ways to convince us to support things that aren't in our best interest, and that if we knew what they were, we wouldn't support them. So it's human rights, it's corruption, it's something like that that's supposed to be some moral crusade we're always on. The problem is people like you and I and Harley Schlanger and the people in our chat, we've been had too many times. People like us, I mean, there are people that, they didn't learn anything from weapons of mass destruction. People like us and all the people in the chat, people that are watching this show and a lot of other India media, they saw that weapons of mass destruction crap and they said, I'll never believe these people again. Anything they say, I can do my own research and figure it out. At least I can trust myself. At least I know I'm trying to find the right answer. These people are deliberately out to do me wrong. And the perfect example, Harman Karzai, who we put in charge of the country. His brother was the number one drug dealer and heroin dealer in the number one heroin dealer in the number one heroin producing country on earth. And we didn't know, we had no part of that. We didn't know about it. And we stuck his brother in. Bottom line is there was deals made. That there was deals made where his brother was the president. Nobody could touch him. And the U.S. probably just, the U.S. government was probably like, okay, yeah, no problem. We'll leave the cocaine alone as long as you guys don't attack us in this section, and we can have these CIA bases and things like that, so we can watch Russia and China and Iran from like the mountains with the rest of the stuff. Who cares? You just grow all the heroin you want, ship it right back to America for all we care. I mean, it's only going to hit the little people. Screw them.
That's right. The little people. And, that's what became of our democracy, is it became the elites and the little people. The destruction of a middle class is a destruction of our democratic republic too. I mean, you don't have enough. If you have to work 3 jobs to feed your family, you don't have time to educate yourself enough to make a reasonable choice, and you're likely to follow, the crowd or whatever, whatever appeals to you on the television screen. Man, we're in a lot of trouble here, but we all are. I think we have our humanity. As long as we don't get compromised, we have our humanity. The ones that are compromised have lost their humanity, and that's, unfortunately, they're going to have to do whatever they're told to do, and if that means you have to stay in Afghanistan on the theory that you're going to be protecting women, which, I think is one of the biggest crocks I've ever heard. That is a crock. And what is really disgusting about it is that there are many credible reports of American troops having to, I don't even want to say it, but allow these crazy tribesmen people to use little boys for their whatever kind of satisfaction they get. They didn't say anything about protecting little boys. I like the idea of protecting women and all kinds of little boys and little girls, and everybody should be protected. But I think there's been a lot of shameful stuff that's gone on in Afghanistan, and look at Abu Ghraib and all of the horrible things that have been done. What really pains me, Garland, is when I hear you and other people say, that the United States is doing this, the government, we're doing this. How can we do this? But at the same time, it's almost like, how can you hold me responsible for it when we don't have any power anymore? We've lost our power. This is where we're at. We are, we're like the good guys that are holding on to this edge of the cliff with our fingernails, and we're trying to stay alive long enough to maybe let the next generation have a chance to be free. And they're just ready to kick our fingernails right off the edge of the cliff and say bye-bye, because they don't like us claiming things like, human rights. Forget the Second Amendment. They don't want us to have the First Amendment, and they don't want us to be smart enough to use it.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, you make a good point, and that is, how does the ruling elite view all of the rest of us, right? And I think the ruling elite, we chomp ourselves up into groups. Well, there's the black people and the brown people and and there's legitimacy to say that there's various groups and coalitions of groups, et cetera, and the Democrats and the Republicans. We chop ourselves more up into groups. I think the ruling elite see us as the great unwashed class. The great class of unwashed, the hoi polloi, whatever, right? And they see us all in that group. And I think they actually have disdain for us. It appears that it's gotten to the point where they're almost looking down their nose. You notice that, you watch some of these shows and you can see it on like the MSNBC shows and these kinds of shows where they're sneering down their nose at the peons and the peasants, right? And, I just think they look down on us with condescension. And it's like we're an irritant. And even I think Biden, like, okay, I'm going to do this bill for family, lowering family taxes, or some of these things that he's doing, right? Here's what I really think about even some of that, a lot of that stuff. When a totalitarian regime gets to the point where it has spun out of control, the big thing they got to worry about is uprisings at home, right? And I think they're looking at what's going on here, and they've seen, they've seen that the U.S. is a tinder box, right? And it only took a match. You had the George Floyd thing, people running in all directions and fires everywhere. It looked like, it was a zombie apocalypse movie, right? Then January 6th, there was a bunch of people there. They weren't happy themselves either. They were running all mayhem, right? And I think the powers that be realize that they have let things spin so out of control that the people are restless. The right, the left, the black, the white, you can find everybody's been out in the street pretty much pissed in the last year, right? And they've created that. So I think now people are like, whoa, Joe Biden's going to do a little something here and there. First of all, most of that money is going to go, as always, into the hands of their buddies. But the bottom line is this: our totalitarian government has gotten to the point where it only exists to expand and take other countries and take other money. It only exists to wage war or asymmetric war and sanctions and things like that. It doesn't exist for us in any way, which means they're kind of concerned, based on what they saw last summer and January 6th, et cetera. They're concerned that there could be some kind of an uprising. So whatever they're doing to give people $1,400, or these latest things where they're saying they're going to do a few things here and there for people, in my belief, it is only enough to say, man, we have neglected our roads, our people, we've given everything to, undid all of the banking regulations, which they're not going to do anything else. That's done to fix that. No Glass-Steagall, no nothing. That now they're willing to throw a few crumbs to the people, just enough, not fix any of the problems that they've created, like reinstall Glass-Steagall or any problems. They ain't going to fix none of those. They just want to do enough so that the people maybe aren't starving, maybe got a morsel of food in their mouths, and they don't uprise. They want to keep you so uncomfortable that you're right on the edge of ready to uprise because you're so uncomfortable, but not quite there yet. So you're struggling and you're suffering, and there's a lot of people in this country don't know if they're going to get thrown out, like all of this stuff about evictions, right? The lockdown, people didn't ask for that to happen. They instituted the lockdowns, and in my opinion, since they instituted the lockdowns, they're responsible to make sure that people who suffered and lost their businesses and their jobs of no fault of their own don't get thrown in the street. In my opinion, that was their decision. People didn't say, I just want to stop working and stay home. That's my thoughts anyway. But they don't care. The bottom line here, all I'm saying is they could care less about us, but they are a little scared that we might go over the edge on them and come out with the pitchforks. And so they'll throw people just enough crumbs to keep us from doing that, if they can get away with it.
Well, some people would say the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment. The the idea of people being angry and getting out the pitchforks and the torches. Um, eh, I I haven't seen one yet that I thought was genuine grassroots. I think that an
Yeah.
awful lot of it is led by the agent provocateur, the paid agents that go out and say, "Hey, let's go, let's bring bottles, let's bring rocks, let's make Molotov cocktails, let's burn down the third precinct." I mean, nobody wants to go and burn down a police precinct, but they somehow get together enough people to pull it off. I think it's all organized. I do not believe that these are grassroots movements, and I also believe that the reason that they happen is not because to let people let off steam or that people are letting off steam, but on the contrary, it's to enable law enforcement to impose greater and greater control. It is a method that they've used over and over again from the Patriot Act onward. To something bad happens, you have your spate of violence, and then the next thing Congress says, "Oh, I know what we can do about that. We can close down your freedoms, and we can empower more private security guards, and we'll put in cameras everywhere." That's what they want to do anyway. This is just an excuse for them to do it. That's my opinion. I'm people are going to get misled into this stuff. I'm not saying they're not genuine, but I do not believe that any of these massive protests would have happened were it not for massive organization in advance by politically astute people that work for big money. And I'm talking about George Soros, for example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the bottom line is this. Here's the way I see it. I see America as a very unstable country, and that's dangerous. I see America as unstable. Where the root. I'll put it like this: the root of the instability. How the instability manifests itself, whether it's protests or whatever, for people voting a certain way, whatever. However it manifests itself, the root of the instability is what we've been talking about. And that's this, plain and simple: the government of the United States, and I don't know how to put it any plainer, does not represent the citizens in any way. It represents a small cabal of very wealthy people. It represents a cabal of corporations and particular groups, such as, and I don't have to go over, but if people said, well, I'd say you've got the Wall Street banking people, of course, London, you know what I mean, the Berlin, but you've got the banking group. You've got now Silicon Valley's a big group. You've got the military industrial. You've got the media, which is kind of the hub that they all work through. But think about this now. Silicon Valley now gets a lot of defense money. So it's turning into just one thing, right? And so that's something we were talking about. I was talking about before, where this whole neoliberalism, globalism, profit for everything. Now what happens? There's so much money to be made in defense contracts that these big Silicon Valley companies, right? They start making tons of money. They get big, and they're like, "Whoa, the real money is over there in the defense contracts." So they set up all kinds of stuff, and then they go to defense contractors, and they get a $500-600 million contract, right? Because they did it for the money. But now they are now bound. The second Jeff Bezos' company Amazon took that $600 billion contract with the CIA, they're now part of the CIA. They become part of the CIA. So now the CIA is completely in their system. Even if Amazon didn't want it, the CIA is 100% owns every computer system they have from one end to the other, right? So because the CIA, they're storing data, allegedly storing data for the CIA, right? Well, isn't it a coincidence that the biggest wealthiest computer company in the world, where like where billions of people all over the world have their data on their sites, also happens to get a contract with the CIA. So now the CIA is completely in their system. NSA is completely in their system. Anything, all the information, there is completely, vulnerable to the CIA. I mean, it's a big game now. But now it's just turned into one. So now the CIA, the intelligence community, is part of Google. They use Google. They literally used Google to cite in drone attacks. Twitter worked with the State Department when there was, and you can find all of these articles for that. There were these protests after one of the elections in Iran, and Twitter was scheduled to do a maintenance, to be down for a couple of hours. The State Department called them and said, no, don't do that. Leave it up. We want the protesters in Iran to be able to use Twitter to protest against their government. Can you imagine what the US would say if Russia or China called and said, hey, we're going to keep TikTok up because we want Americans that are fighting against the American government to all be able to use TikTok to go against their government? The US would go insane. That's basically what we're doing. So the bottom line is, through sanctions, they use the banks for asymmetric warfare on other countries, right? Through Twitter or Google or Amazon, they use the computers, the whole network of computers worldwide for sanctions. All of these things are just used as everything's a weapon. Everything is a weapon for the US to attack other people. Nothing's really even a company anymore. It's a company to make money, but they're all tied into the Pentagon, tied into the intelligence community, and they're all just parts of the weapons that they can use to attack us. Or, we thought they were using it to attack other countries. Now people are seeing they're using all of these weapons again to attack their own citizens, because we're the threat, because they don't represent us. And like Americans are like getting hip to that, saying, hey, you guys, you don't represent us. We don't like that. We'd like to vote you out or go in a different direction. They're like, oh, you would, will you? Well, we're going to throw you off Twitter. We're going to shut down your YouTube show. We'll teach you guys who's in charge.
Yeah. And, the whole overpopulation thing that's been a big theme of mine for ever since my show started. We've been watching the growth of eugenics from the early 1800s to World War II with the Nazis, and then they changed the name of eugenics to environmentalism. And the first Earth Day was created not necessarily to celebrate or to try to preserve the Earth so much as to say, hey, we've got an overpopulation problem. We've got a population bomb. If you remember
Yep.
that explosive title that I had to read when I was, I think, high school, when we had to read that thing by a guy named Ehrlich. Well, all that stuff has been debunked, and we don't have an overpopulation problem really, but that is their rationale for kind of letting bad things happen that unfortunately, bad things happen. Oh, we had a war in Iraq, and unfortunately, a million people died. That was a bad thing, but we had to have the war in Iraq. Why do we have to have the war in Iraq? Well, I can't remember, but now we've got a better chance to control Iraq than we did, before we went there, and we're trying to control every place that has oil. Well, somewhere along the line, it makes sense, because it really is all about the banks. And I think Harley's solution is the only one to me that makes sense, and that is, let's recognize that the banking system itself is bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Let's recognize that all of these financial instruments that they keep creating, and I think the Paris Accords, the carbon credit scheme is another one of these schemes to try to create money from nothing, or to create money from obliging our great grandchildren to pay some money later on in some kind of environmental taxes. Or the whole idea to me is that they, I think, keep creating more and more schemes to refinance debts that have not been legitimate debts for decades. They're just old pieces of paper. We've got to force this corrupt financial system into bankruptcy. to take these banks and collapse them down into reasonable sizes and say, hey, no, guess what? All of these pieces of paper that you've been betting on, well, they're just pieces of paper, guys. You got to recognize that now. We're not going to no longer believe that your derivatives of your derivatives of your derivatives have any value. What do you think about that? And we'll make that our last topic for tonight. What do you think about reforming the banking system with a real serious, just send them all into the bankruptcy court?
That's the only way. Like, what was it? The ancient city in Greece, I believe, that forgave all of their debt. At some point, because right now you have to do something dramatic, because these numbers it's like video game numbers. You know what I mean? It's like when you're like playing a video game and you're really good at it in the numbers, and you got 10,000, then you got 100,000, then you got 10 million points, then you got ships lined up all about it. The bottom line is it's not real. Well, that's what our money system has turned into now. It's a joke. You're $28 trillion in debt at this point. At that point, it ain't even real anymore. When you get like 20 some trillion dollars in debt, at that point, you have to realize that the money is just something. It's rhetorical money. You're talking about it as though it was money, but in reality, there's nothing $28 trillion worth on this earth. So I think that's right. I think we got to understand that this banking system we have as a whole, because what happened, a lot of people don't know what actually happened in the 1990s. People bring up Glass-Steagall as being, that in the 90s, Clinton signed a bill to get rid of Glass-Steagall. But what they probably don't know is that they basically, the Clinton people, and they bragged about it, right after the Depression, there were a bunch of banking regulations put in. They just basically called them the New Deal banking regulations, but it was real. Here's what they did. Imagine they had some sense. They looked at the things that caused the banks to crash, and they put in a bunch of rules that said you can't do this anymore. And what do you know? They didn't crash. It was obvious to them. It wasn't anything real complicated, right? So they do that. So what happens? In the mid to late 90s, the Clinton people, the Clintons and the 101st Congress, remember the Republican Congress, Newt Gingrich, they all get together and they start dismantling the New Deal banking regulations. That was why 2008 hit. And you were right. In 1981, Chuck Schumer was one, two other people. Another guy's name was Saint Germain. It was two Democrats and a Republican passed the savings and loan deregulation bill in the 81. 7 years later, 1987, what happens? Savings and loan crisis. We bought, $1 billion or whatever, we bail them out, right? It was obvious. You deregulated them, you got rid of everything. And as you said, it was a joke at that point. When the Clinton people did the same thing, it's 99, he signs the end of Glass-Steagall, but that was really the end of all the New Deal banking regulations, 99. What happens 7, 8 years, 9 years later? Boom, same exact thing has happened in the 80s. Anybody could have saw that coming. The thing about it is now that, Glass-Steagall, a number of other things, because these entities have so much power now, the government doesn't even have the power to, to change put the bank regulations back if they wanted to. Back then, Congress regulated the banks. Now the banks regulate Congress. Now those powers, so Congress used to regulate these corporations. That was their job. No, now these corporations regulate Congress by saying, if you don't vote the way I want on this bill, or in many instances, the corporations will write the bill. Give it to a member of Congress, which is what happened in New York with Cuomo. They literally, the New York Hospital Association literally wrote a bill to make themselves immune from being sued for all the coronavirus stuff. They wrote a bill and they literally handed it to Andrew Cuomo and he put it through. But basically, that's the way the game is now. The Congress and these politicians just work for these corporations. So how can we have any power if they don't even work for us? They work for the corporations.
The only answer is we have to reassert ourselves as citizens and not subjects. We have to get organized and take back Congress. Congress makes the laws. That's the essence of American system. Congress makes the laws, and even they know that. If they may have to buy the Congress to make the laws they want, but it's the Congress that makes the laws. Without Congress, we have no chance. So that's the only thing I can say. let's all pressure our Congress to put Glass-Steagall back and to break these big banks down and take away all of that trash paper that they are keep trading among themselves, pretending that it's worth something. I agree with you completely. You know, it takes a government to create a corporation, and a corporation is only a piece of paper, and the government has the right and the power always to dissolve a corporation that's not in the government's interest. That is it. That's the only way it can work. We can't allow corporations to be running our governments, as you said. Thanks so much, Garland. That's I think I'll let that be the last word for tonight. And yeah, we met a lot of we've got a lot of things going on. I think we're building a consensus, Garland. I really do. And thank you so much for your contribution tonight.
All right. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Okay. We'll see you next week.
All righty.